Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second episode of The Sound of Healing. I'm so excited today to interview somebody that I deeply respect, Benjamin Irons, who's here. And I'd like to tell you who Benjamin Irons is in case you don't know. So Benjamin, or Ben, I guess I can call you Ben.
Ben's great.
Ben, okay. Ben is a sound practitioner, a professional musician, a meditation instructor, author, and artist collaborator for Dragonfly Percussion. Through his private practice, Zen with Ben, in Boulder, Colorado, he works extensively with sound vibration as a form of alternative medicine for stress-related conditions. His signature series of singing bowl wands and inviters consists of 15 innovative mallet models covering a wide range of sonic possibilities for metal and crystal singing bowls. And I know they're great because I own a couple. Ben holds a BM in Instrumental Performance from Northern Arizona University, as well as certifications from the University of Holistic Theology, the Southwestern Institute of Healing Arts, and the Atma Bhuti Sound and Vibrational School in Boulder. He is a proud member of the International Association of Meditation Instructors, the Sound Healers Association, and the American Federation of Musicians. Ben regularly performs as a freelance orchestral percussionist, and he's performed throughout the United States, Europe, and China, working most notably with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the San Diego Symphony, Colorado Symphony, Hawaii Symphony, Phoenix Symphony, New Mexico Philharmonic, and the Grammy-nominated True Concord Voices and Orchestra. Each winter, Irons performs with the Arizona Music Festival Orchestra in Scottsdale, Arizona, comprised of players from the nation's finest orchestras. Wow, thank you so much for being here. What wonderful qualifications, and I just can't wait to get started with this conversation.
Awesome, let's do it.
Okay, so, obviously you have a very strong classical background. I'm also a classical musician, and I'm just fascinated by classical musicians who have kind of made this journey from classical music and maybe entertaining people and performing and knowing that music is very powerful as they've experienced, but then, want to serve others and want to help others with music and with the powerful healing properties. So can you kind of tell me how you move from one place to another?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here and chat. It is interesting, right? And I'm appreciating how many of our colleagues in the kind of classical realm are starting to see the benefits of, what our instrument and what our vocation is capable of outside of the standard concert halls. And a big part of how I got to where I was I think it's fascinating for non-percussionists, because as a percussionist, so many of our instruments are pulled from across the world. And so I think it's a really natural stepping stone. Like, we have gong for Rachmaninoff, we have gong for yoga. So we just pivot. But when other musicians kind of gravitate towards it, I find that so interesting, because I would imagine it's slightly more disorienting to try to, to pivot with your clarinet, for example, and how would you do like a quasi raga with your clarinet? I don't know that that's as clearly defined, but maybe it doesn't need to be. We have to be careful of appropriation. But the short answer is, when I got out of college and I was doing my professional auditions, I was struggling with some performance anxiety and was looking for different techniques to help work with that, kind of experience, and recognize that if I didn't tackle a lot of the thoughts I was having in my auditions, I was going to be fighting this, uphill battle throughout my career. And that led to meditation, which led to yoga, which led to hypnotherapy, and then eventually to sound therapy, as I was working at a corporate meditation center in Phoenix that really specialized in like hammock yoga with like the gong and singing bowls. And so as a trained percussionist, then watching these yogis play percussion instruments was really just saw a lot of opportunity for some education. Never really went into the music education realm so much. I prefer the performance side, but the basics of what we do were fundamentally lacking. And what I found really ironic was this sense of misintention or unintentional kind of practices in an industry that's founded on intention. And so a really cool way to kind of fuse these worlds together. And I'm still learning different outlets for that. But I do remember the first time I felt a singing bowl on my heart center. I had this immediate thought of like, yeah, we're doing this now. I don't need to go back to the orchestra. I mean, I've been back to the orchestra plenty. But the first time, that I really had that sensation, I was like, oh, this is eye-opening, and I need to explore this. And have had little markers of encouragement along the way where when I'm back on stage with the orchestra now, I experience it in a very different way. I feel the bass drum through me. I feel the gongs through me. My father's a medical doctor, and he was in for one of my private sessions and sat up on the table after a session and said, I think there's more happening here than what we learned in medical school. And I was like, whoa, okay, here we go. So they've been really supportive. My folks have been very supportive and really helpful of me sort of trying to understand, we're still trying to understand this medicine and what it's capable of. And so much of it exists beyond what we can measure. And so they've been really helpful for me to sort of figure out like little ways that I can kind of quantify the remarkable experience that I've been having with sound.
Right. You say so many things there that I want to explore. First of all, on the subject of performance anxiety, I too have struggled with that. In fact, my senior year of college was a terrible year. My mother found out she had cancer. I was just a wreck. My senior recital was horrible, and I can't even believe they let me, graduate. I was so much better musician than I performed that year. And it was all stress related. And I wish I had known about these practices back then. There was really nothing that I had that I could do. I do remember doing a little bit of hatha yoga in my dorm room, and doing the best I could. But how is it that these instruments work? That they just do their magic, even without you really having to put much effort in. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. So we're working on a level underneath music therapy. And when I say underneath, I don't mean like that's beneath us, but the way that these vibrations work, so when we speak about music therapists, so I'm not a trained music therapist, right? That's a whole other specialty, a whole other program. And but I work with sound. And so we classify sound as sort of the level underneath music, so to speak. So music therapy is using these melodic lines, the tessitura, to elicit emotional responses to help people work through, just emotional expression. We're actually going a layer underneath that because these sounds are typically monotone. They're simple, they're very stable, and they're very soothing. So they're in an octave range, so at a pitch range that we find really relaxing. And the quality of sound, it's something about it just really speaks to me. And I have frosted crystal bowls, I have Himalayan bowls. I don't know, maybe it's my percussion background or I'm a bit of a caveman. I prefer my metal bowls. The complexity of the overtones, I just find so much more interesting. It's actually kind of ruined the orchestra for me because I remember my first time on stage with an orchestra, really thinking we were playing Stravinsky's Firebird. And I remember thinking like, whoa, this is a cool, rich texture of sound. Like I've never really been engulfed in anything like this, which is one of the reasons I fell in love with it. But since then have noticed, because of the complex overtone series spectrum in these bowls, pardon me, that the just intonation, the equal temperament at the orchestra now feels really hollow. I can almost climb through it like a lattice. And it's totally changed how I listen to it. But essentially, we've got these long, stable sounds and I'm speaking like singing bowl, gong. It's very repetitive. It's very predictable. So it feels really safe. We don't have to worry about like a surprise coming up. Like the range of sounds are fairly narrow. So you're talking about either a drone or a single invitation of stable sound. And what that does is it allows our nervous system to relax and kind of shift out of that sympathetic nervous response of fight or flight or freeze into rest and digest. And our body knows how to go back into homeostatic wellness. It knows what it needs, but it just needs a container to just set everything aside for a little bit and let it unwind in that way. And so that's the underlying principle. So it's working with the vagus nerve, which runs, from our brain all the way into our stomach. And the way that we perceive sound actually through the ear is only one way. We primarily receive sound through skin and bone conduction. So it's just a really ubiquitous human experience. So you could have earplugs in or honestly be deaf and still receive those benefits of the vibration and the sound.
Uh-huh. Yeah, as a trained musician, I think I had to get through this obstacle of feeling like this is the simplicity of it, just the sustained tones, and that's all there is. And then I came to realize that, well, that is all there is, and that's the beauty of it, and I don't have to think about it or critique it like I would a piece of music as I listen, because even when I listen to music, I mean, sometimes it's hard to enjoy it, because you're listening. How are the articulations in that passage? Or, I think they could have done a little better in the dynamics or whatever, and you're just like this critic, this judge. But I think with sound, it brings you into that sort of meditative state so beautifully and so easily. I mean, you would really have to fight hard against it, not to not to enter that parasympathetic state.
Yeah, but I mean, so the struggles that come up in those sessions, though, are all ego-driven struggles that you experience on the meditation cushion or in yoga as well. And so it's sort of a baby version of what happens on stage, but the stakes are so much lower.
Right.
But there's still opportunity, and I think that's where the human experience can be challenging for people as a facilitator or as a practitioner with this art. It's almost so much space, and the room or your client will only ever be as comfortable with silence as you are. And so it's really important to have a practice to know how to hold that space, because your thoughts are going to start going everywhere unless you're practiced and working with that. And because of the simplicity of these tones, it's really easy to start to get impatient or restless or second guess yourself or feel like you need to really massage or nuance a situation, when in fact you can just let it be, and that's plenty.
Right. Sometimes I think too much knowledge can be harmful,
Definitely.
Embrace the simplicity of it. When you're talking about the gongs and the orchestra and using percussion instruments, I've done some conducting too, and I've never seen a score that tells the percussionist specifically to find one certain timbre in the gong or anything. It's just, does that irritate you now that you know that there's this spectrum, this plethora of sounds you could get from the gong?
What a great question. It depends. So the general, I don't know, my philosophy on the orchestra side is have a plan, but just know that it's probably not going to go to plan. So I like that we have room for that interpretation. I mean, so much of our job is dictated to us, where I don't get to pick the pieces. I don't often even get to pick the part or the instrument that I'm using. Our principal or whoever's in charge is assigning that to me. The conductor is telling you how they want it done. So there's some kind of template-y things that we can do, but any chance for us to be as artists, and really craft that and make it our own, I think is a wonderful opportunity. So it can be frustrating because we don't have a lot of guidance sometimes, and it's totally subjective at that point. So you can get in some interesting sort of debates with colleagues or peers, or it blows my mind when percussionists marry other percussionists. And then you have this like sort of domestic infighting about like, well, I would have used this instrument. It's like, well, you're wrong. It's, I don't know. We recently did Rachmaninoff's First Symphony with New Mexico Philharmonic, and I'd never done it before. It's a very cool piece, and I love Rachmaninoff. His Second Symphony is one of my all-time favorite pieces, and there's this beautiful solo gong note in the piece. And I did my score study. I listened to my favorite orchestras, and I kind of pulled like what sound would be perfect there. And I used an instrument that I don't normally use, but I thought like, this is it. And it's sort of modeled after a concertgebouw, Royal Concertgebouw recording. And I adore the concertgebouw. And I was like, this is cool. I'm going to do it. So I get in there and I play my note, and everyone starts laughing. And you're like, whoa, okay, wait a second. Because one, what happened was not a fumble. Like, this was intentional. Like, this was an artistic choice. Like, we shouldn't be shaming each other for these decisions. Like, this should be a place for us to like, okay, I see what you did there. Maybe not what I would have done. I still stand by it. But the conductor was like, no, that's not the sound at all. We need this other thing. And you're like, all right, fine. If that's what you want, we'll do that. But, it it doesn't really matter what you choose. It was going to be wrong, but you might as well make a choice. At least I got to hear it once in context. And I know for me, like, I would do that again. I absolutely would do that again. But yeah, a big part of our job is sort of figuring out like, well, what works here? And you have to balance the logistics. There's a pragmatic aspect of it of like, well, is this realistic? Could we actually do this? Talking about like Harry Potter Live, where every percussionist on stage needs 2 gongs. It's like, well, do we actually need 10 gongs, or can we share a little bit? And yeah, we have to, you have to navigate those things. I think it's cool, but other people might find it a chore.
Well, I mean, just that you're eliciting a response is great, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, let's explore talking about gongs. All right, I have a gong, and I've watched your workshop. Yeah, I actually love it. Actually, nice wind gong there. But tell us a little bit about. Now, you alluded to the fact that when you went to sound bath and started getting interested in this, that you found that some of the technique was lacking. I think that I can see how that would be true. I mean, people hit a gong and they think that's all there is to it. Just hit it. And in fact, I wonder how much, misinformation is out there. And how are you going about, teaching, the correct technique, I guess, first of all, and why is the correct technique important is the other question.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks. Um, so the correct technique, and correct is loose. I mean, I don't want to be dogmatic about it. One of the things about my lineage of orchestral percussion that I came from that I really appreciate is how open-minded it was, as far as like, what sound are you trying to achieve and how do we help you achieve that? But within that, then there are no wrong answers. So my teachers would have played with pineapples if they thought that that would have gotten them the sound that they needed. They didn't care about the optics of it. It was all about the sound and the art. And so the technique is important for a couple reasons. One, it affects quality of sound, and quality of sound will then affect the experience. We want smooth, lovely, luscious, rich tones when appropriate. Sometimes we need, and this is maybe a hot topic for people, sometimes you need a little bit crunchy because there's stuff in our system we got to kick up and loosen. For me, the main reason is that I want to make sure that the facilitator feels in control. So they're in charge of the container, whether it's for a single client or for a group session. And if they don't have the technical facility to manage the vehicle of that container, who knows where it's going to go? And you can't, it's already like everyone's going to have their own kind of experience anyway. But it's really difficult to gauge when something is, quote unquote, successful or skillful, but you don't know what you were doing to repeat those results. And it's also equally important if something goes disastrously wrong and you're like, I don't want to be in that situation ever again, but you don't know what you did. So how can you, repeat again or avoid these types of situations? But really it comes down to the quality of the sound, and the touch is so important. And even within orchestral percussion, there's different thoughts on this and different pedagogical lineages that might not pay as much attention to that. And it's almost the difference between when you're a student of music and you're really young and you're really focusing on the beginning of sound, but pay no attention to how you end a sound. And then when you grow to a certain point of mastery, you recognize like the way that we end these tones is just as important. We don't, do we clip it? Do we let it vibrato out? How many young players I see hold a triangle up, and while the triangle is moving, they drop it, and you get this Doppler effect through the orchestra. And it's just like, all you had to do is just stay with that a second longer and be present, with the tone. So I don't know, there's a million little things, but so much of my experience is that I love the sound. So ego driven. I love the sound so much, but I have a really hard time participating as someone in the sound bath, because what happens around me, like you said, it's so hard to turn off the analysis side. If it's real bad, it's real bad, and I can't do anything differently. So I'm out on a very individual mission to elevate the industry so that I can participate in it. That's what it is.
Okay, you can actually be a participant. That's great.
I want to sit in and listen to someone play gong and have it be like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Now, tell me about the gong and its effect on the body, and how is it different than the bowls, or is there a difference? Is it just preference or?
Total preference. I think it's total preference. So that's one of the things that I think is so cool about this, is that there's so much room. I was thinking about this in the shower this morning. There's so much room to personalize these experiences. And I was really debating, like, yes, I'm a white dude playing indigenous Himalayan instruments or Asiatic instruments. At what point is this appropriation? You know, is it, because I studied with someone from the Himalayas, does it make it less offensive, you know, as opposed to just studying with some white person, you know, in the mountains somewhere? I don't really know. I don't have answers to these things. All I can do is honor where we've come from and try to make it my own craft in a way that speaks to me and helps elevate. So for me, it's all personal preference. So I love that people are into crystal bowls. I think that's super cool. I still prefer bronze, but that's just me. But I use both. They both have a place in the world. And what I like about the gongs is how they balance the singing bowls. And one of my teachers had sort of alluded to this aspect, and this is totally your personal interpretation and your intention. The intention is the most important part. But they had mentioned how the singing bowls have more of a feminine energy, the gongs have more of a masculine energy. So when you use both, you get into this sort of yin yang balance. I think both have both, because even as humans, we both have both. There's a lot of ambiguous language here, but
Right.
we, you know, Shiva Shakti, right? So we've got these weaving patterns, and so using both together, I think is really lovely to balance one another. They do have different qualities. Why I think people love the gong so much is if it truly does have more of the masculine energy over the singing bowls, for example. It's becoming increasingly rare in our society to have a safe, energetic exchange with masculine energy. And I
Mhm.
think that's why people are so into it, because they don't have to worry about all of those sort of Me Too pitfalls that you would fall into with a human. The gong doesn't have that agenda.
That's interesting. Wow. Wow. So, yeah, I've had people come to my sound baths, and some of them, what's your favorite instrument? I'll ask at the end. And there are people that say, it's the gong, definitely. And they'd love
Always.
to spend much more time on the gong. Um,
Yeah. I was playing 4 mallets on crystal bowls, which is totally unnecessary. It was just I had the time and I was like, let's play around a little bit and like use this orchestral training. And I was doing some, not to pat myself on the back, some next level things that were so unnecessary, but really proud of myself. Like that was cool. I would do that again. And someone's like, "Oh my god, your gong is so nice." I was like, "Yeah, but
yeah,
fine."
right. Um, Volume on the gong, you
Oh,
know? Oh, is there a limit in the sound bath? No?
yes.
Okay, good, yes.
Yes, there is. Yeah. Yeah, I think we've all had, sorry, this is a hot topic. I think we've all had that experience of the sound bath that is wildly out of control. Um, yeah, and that is part of the training as well, because if you're not familiar with your technique or the boundaries of the instrument, you can push it into a threshold that is no longer safe nor comfortable. And so knowing what the instrument is capable of, so you can tiptoe up to that boundary without going past it. But even if you do go past it, like know that you went past it and then pull it back again.
Right,
So in our classical training, it's all tension and release, right? So we're
yes,
creating these musical tension and we resolve that. And it's sort of the same thing for me in a sound bath. So
right,
you can use those peaks to put a little bit of tension in. It reminds me of having like a really stiff muscle. Like if you squeeze more on the muscle and then release, it sometimes relaxes more. But do that sparingly. Like don't live at that threshold. And yeah, it weirds me out when I see videos online of like these gong camps or summits or, big group sessions, and there's 30 people in a circle and they're all wailing. I mean, you can see from the stroke type, their hands are way above their head. And um, nothing about just looking at it, nothing about that feels good on my system. And so
right,
we want to keep the sound bath in a place where people can relax into it. And when you get too loud, too fast for too long, you brace. You absolutely brace. There's just at a subconscious level, you don't know what your body's in for. And so just you can get to those points, but leave some space to relax. I wish there was more silence in the sound baths.
right,
And I know that's hard because people are paying for the sound, but the sound only means something because it's balanced in silence. It's always in duality.
right. So you're talking about kind of an overall architecture for a sound bath, and thinking about the structure of it. And I remember you also saying in your workshop that, the body can only take so much. It needs time to rest. And the gong typically is going to bring things up, right? I mean, that's kind of the point of it, right?
Yeah.
And so having that space to just kind of release is also key, and definitely probably enhanced by your classical training. By years and years of studying and playing pieces of composers that know how to do that in an expert fashion.
Totally. And I think my instrument too is kind of jokingly known for the amount of silence in between things. So sometimes it's nonstop, but other times we have really long periods where
Oh
nothing is
yeah,
happening.
counting how many. What's the record of measures you've had to count in?
Oh yeah, I don't even know. I
Like,
mean, if you look at Beethoven 9 as classic, we're not even into the fourth movement. So you're on stage for 40 minutes waiting. I mean, it was gorgeous. Remember my parents coming to a concert and my dad said, I'm really impressed with how well you can just sit patiently. I was like, well, not just sitting there. Like I'm listening, I'm appreciating my colleagues, and everything I am
right.
also in the concert.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about, you have a client that comes to you, you do a lot of private sessions, from what I'm reading. And, what can they expect? So you're kind of reading their energy as they come in. Are they talking to you about what they're feeling? Just tell us how, there will be listeners here that have never experienced a sound bath at all. So let's just walk them through it.
Yeah. My sound baths are slightly different from sound therapy. So in my world, these are two separate sort of experiences. The sound bath is a meditation. For me, meditation is always an active process. So you're working on honing focus and concentration through breath work, through body sensations, through sound, through a meditative focus. But it should be active. You should be participating. You should be with that experience. Now, so many of us are overwhelmed and are new to this practice, and it's so effective and relaxing that many people fall asleep in these sessions or really kind of hang out in that theta brainwave kind of twilight state, and that's totally fine. But for me, the goal with a sound bath meditation is meditative focus. Sound therapy is a passive process. So when you come and see me one-on-one, if you want to stay focused and alert and meditate through it, totally fine. Almost everyone falls asleep, and that's okay because the bowls are there to help you relax anyway, and I'm going to be doing the work regardless. So it depends on what my expression is. So in a sound bath, then typically what I would do is, there's been a lot of studies in this, not as many as I would like. I wish there were more, but there's diminishing returns of the health benefits of sound after about 13 minutes, 20 minutes. So while it's cool when you see these, like, we're going to do a 24-hour gong session, you're like, that's great, but you're kind of wasting 23 hours that you could be just integrating and doing other things. But if you want to do that, that's, I guess, go for it. I wouldn't say no to it if I had a chance, I guess, just to see like what my endurance is for that. I feel like it would be an energetic challenge for sure. But yeah, so generally what I'll do is I'll invite folks in. We'll have a little chat just about like what they might work on or what they might hear or experience. I really try to balance in a meditation independent invitations of sound with drones so that you have an opportunity to hone focus and concentration. And each individual tone, each little like bum, is an opportunity for someone to come back to their breath or back to their bodies. We want to make sure that we give them those bucket handholds, footholds to grab onto the rungs of the sonic ladder. That's cool. I've never said that before. I like it. And but also, the drones, you give them the space in the container to like sit with that and be with it. Sound therapy. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, answer some, like maybe play some demo sounds just real fast. Like this is the gong, this is the bowl, so that people don't feel, they don't want to sit up and be like, well, what did he just do? Like give them enough familiarity, to feel safe. Then we do a little breath work and body scan, and then I just transition into sound, and we'll do that for 45 minutes. And that's the most I would probably do. I don't tend to go longer than 45 minutes because even in my single sessions, one-on-one, one of my favorite sound therapy protocols is 90 minutes, but people get so fidgety at 60 that they're no longer enjoying it. It's really hard for them to surrender and relax long enough to receive that. We're in a society of instant gratification.
Yes.
So it's this balance between like easing them in, make haste slowly is what we're trying to do. So ease them into the experience, get them there into a relaxed state quickly, but then you got to get them out again because they're already thinking about Netflix and grocery shopping and whatever else is happening. My sound therapy sessions are a little bit different. So I tend to work primarily with the bowls, sometimes gongs. It depends. I'll ask people like, hey, what are you here for? What are you interested in? And I do ask some intake questions because I don't want to, if you come to me and you say, I've been experiencing, some depression, I've been really heavy, I just feel stuck. I don't want to do too much in my session that like is grounding. I mean, I do, grounding is important, but you're already in a rut. We got to get you out and expansive here a little bit. So I might do more things geared towards the bioenergy field, or things that kind of draw you out of your experience. Conversely, if you come in and you say, I've been so scattered, I just feel really restless, I can't sit still, I'm so fidgety, I'm going to put as much vibration into your body like directly as I can, because we got to get you back here. You're already way out there. So more of dispersive energy won't help this person. And I want to know that. And so, and again, in duality, I kind of want to balance both generally, but I'll start with what they need and then we'll balance all that stuff out as we go.
Fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. You just gave me so much to think about. I can hardly think about what question I want to ask next. This is such good stuff. So how often do your clients come and see you? Like how long do these benefits last?
My main teacher, Surin Shrestha, who founded the Atma Buddhi School in Boulder, always said that sound therapy is like a hug. One hug is great. More hugs is better. But what one session is pretty potent. And I mean, again, this is the balance between holistic wellness and allopathic medicine, Western medicine, where, again, we want that instant gratification. And this is a long game. I mean, this is more preventative wellness.
Right.
So one session is very effective. And actually, while most people fall asleep on the table, and I do a lot of like little study things. So if you do come see me, don't be surprised if I have a little pulse oximeter or a little EEG cap kind of thing, because I want to know. I want to know what's happening in these sessions. And I think having that data is so interesting. So people's heart rate slows down, their oxygen levels go up. It's really cool to see in real time. And while you feel those effects immediately, where you really feel it is 24 hours and 48 hours later, things start to kind of balance out in your system. And unfortunately, I'm never there to like measure those things, but this is what I hear time and time again from my clients. So you could come in once and it would be fine, like acupuncture, like we would do a nice balance and it would probably do some things. But if you came in weekly, over a period of 4 or 6 weeks, that's better. The effects last longer and they come faster the more that you're doing it. It's just like meditation.
Right. I had recently I had somebody come in and when he was in the sound bath, I didn't know this, but beforehand he had looked at his pulse, on his Apple Watch. And then afterwards, he stayed around and made some comments, and it was his first time he really loved it. And he said, "Oh my gosh, my pulse went down by 12 points. I'm just astounded." He had been somebody in the medical field as well, but it was so great to have that data. I mean, because we read about the effects of leisure, but I mean, to have someone sitting there and actually looking at the before and after, I was quite amazed.
Totally. And actually, when they have it on, he probably saw those results at about 8 or 9 minutes into the session. And then it probably held steady there at that point, just based off of my experience taking those measurements. And I was working. So one of my early offices, I move way too much. I'm in Colorado now, but I was initially in Arizona and then New Mexico for a minute. And I just bop around. But my office in Tempe, I was sharing with a massage therapist and a sports kinesthesiologist. Sports massage primarily. And so he had a lot of clients in, and he's a big dude, large former football player, beefy guy, really sweet. I had walked a client out and he came out to me and he said, "Hey, do you have that pulse oximeter?" And I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" And he said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." And he was like in his 30s. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, maybe we should call an ambulance." And he was like, "No, it might be a panic attack. Can we use the pulse oximeter and just see?" And I was like, "All right, man." Like, so we sat him down in my office and put the pulse ox on, and his pulse was about 115, which is high. So there was some activation happening. And I said, "Are you sure you don't want me to call you an ambulance? Like, if you're feeling faint and you're feeling heart palpitations and you're racing, like maybe we should do something." And he's like, "No, let's just give it a minute." So I said, "Let's do this." And warning for our viewers, like, this worked out great, but there might be, liability implications of what happened. But, I'm asking the whole time, "Do you want me to call the ambulance?" He said, No. But So I had him lay down on the table. I put my body bowl on his heart and just started rubbing the bowl. And at about a minute of this vibration into his body, his pulse had come down, I think from 115 to like 85 had come down already, 30 points and 30 beats. And then we kept going. And by 5 minutes, it was at 72 and it held there until 10 minutes. And so the bowl did an incredible job of just immediately putting in that relaxing, like, you're okay, like, let's bring this down, get the cortisol out, like, it's all right. And he was really like, we're thrilled that we didn't have to pay a $5,000, ER bill, but it was really cool to see in real time with the pulse ox and like an actual, like, hey, I think I'm having a panic attack. Okay, here's a little bowl. And then like brought it all down.
Right. Yeah. Talk about athletes, musicians. I think of, air traffic controllers, careers that are really high stress, where you are chronically in a state where you have to be on every second. And there's no, and it is a stressful, athletes. It's a stressful career when you have to be on at every moment. And this correlation between stress and disease and illness is so interesting to me, so fascinating to me. I think we are really just hitting the tip of the iceberg. And I know there's studies that show that 95%, maybe even higher percentage of illnesses are stress related or stress induced.
Yeah.
And I don't think we really get that, because I think you can handle stress. You think you're handling it over a long period of time, years and years and years, until it finally kind of catches up with you. And then you don't even realize, oh, well, it was stress related. So I think these ongoing practices, preventive medicine is really the future must be the future of medicine, I believe.
Yeah, we've got the triage part more or less covered.
Yeah.
It does come down to the education side of like making sure people understand healthy practices, right? And healthy work-life balance, making sure that we have that allostatic load kind of in check, the cumulative stress, and how we experience that. And and it's hard because there's no real money to be said in preventative medicine per se, because it's not a quick fix. It's not like you can immediately say, well, you have a broken femur, now you have a fixed femur, and there's a cost for that. It's really hard to put a cost on this, other than that, we as practitioners have to ask for our time and our expertise and our training. And that can be a hard sell. And so much of our experience as practitioners is like also in the small business realm, which we're not really trained in. So it's really unfair. Just like,
Yes.
even as musicians, it's really unfair that you could be so great at one part of your job, but like be held back because of like peripheral things. So, it all comes down to education. So educating ourselves as practitioners for how we can be more accessible in our community and the value of our services, and education in the community for the benefits, literally the cost benefit of preventative wellness, of knowing like, hey, if you're doing these things, if you've got your exercise, if you're doing acupuncture or Tai Chi or meditation or sound therapy, it could offset some catastrophes down the road. But because you're preventing catastrophe, it's all hypothetical. So but I think very valid. So I'm a huge fan. And yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the majority of our physical illnesses and even mental illness that we experience does start as stress in the body.
Right. And we're trying to help people play the long game, but oftentimes our clients are people that have already been through it, and experiencing the effects of,
Totally. Yeah.
So what about misconceptions, myths about sound healing? What have you encountered? And I'm particularly interested in, within the classical realm and also in the medical field, because you also have that, that part of your life as well with your,
Yeah. Misconceptions in the medical field. For starter, it's more, the medicine that we use is more potent than people give it credit for. It's very easy to write off as like a very woo-woo medicine, but what's so interesting to me is that this resurgence of it is, that we're like, oh, this is this is the crowning moment of sound healing in the West is coming to be, and how cool are these practices and these instruments? It's like, yeah, but they're also 5,000 years old, you know. So this medicine that we're taught at the Atmabuti school has been around for millennia, but there's so few practitioners that we're running the risk of it like going extinct because of that. And I think that's a big challenge. And because it works primarily with quantum mechanics as opposed to Newtonian physics, which is a whole other discussion, it's very difficult to quantify the results other than through the experience itself. And so I think it's important for everyone just to have an open mind and know how much we love music, no matter what. It's if you haven't been to the Music Instrument Museum in Scottsdale, the MIM, it's incredibly cool. And I don't understand why it's in Phoenix. It should be in Chicago or New York or something, but we'll take it. I love it. I've not spent in a single visit less than 8 hours there. Have you been, Leslie?
I haven't actually, no.
Oh my God, this is so cool.
So I will go. Not far away.
Yeah. So basically they break up through the museum. They go by continent and then countries within the continent, and they have the instruments of each country there, but they have, so you can see it, you can hear it through audio, and then they have video of indigenous or local native persons playing that instrument. So you get this kind of three-pronged educational approach. But they also have an entire pop music section. You know, they have the first Steinway is there, and you're just like, oh my God, this is insanely cool. And there was a reason I brought this up. How did we get into this conversation?
Who knows?
I don't know how I got into it, but
well, you know, I think
I was onto something.
One thing that I'm thinking is that, you know, I think it will only be embraced fully when we have as a culture, we have a mind shift, you know, a mind shift where we're embracing, you know, this Western mind, Eastern body idea, right? Or was it Western body, Eastern mind? I forget. You know,
Right.
Judith wrote that book, but you know, this separation in embracing Eastern ideas, when there's so much wisdom there to be had, and oftentimes in Western science, we've kind of drawn that line somehow, that boundary, and I don't really understand why. Maybe it's because of the, you know, lack of being able to quantify things.
Yeah.
Not be rid of the prime, you know, motive for everything.
I think that's huge. I mean, obviously, there's something to be said about the commercialization, of pharmacology. So it's a lot easier to sell pills on a regular basis than it is to sell one gong. Maybe not. I don't know. I feel like a gong is an easy sell, but no one's trying to, you know, really pitch that. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm really trying to figure out why we got into the MIM. Anyway, I think it's about being open-minded. So it's a lot of it is cultural awareness, which is cool that we have the visibility in our social media now to see these other cultural experiences. There's this really cool video that came up recently on TikTok, and it was a Scottish wedding between a Scottish gentleman and an Indian woman, and they had both the bagpipes and Indian drums. Not Native American, yet properly Indian, but it was really cool. It's cool to see these mashups, and nice to see that we're in an era now where we can pull in all these arenas. And I'm so grateful to every Western physician that has taken a chance on bringing in an element like this. I was speaking with Rain Gray recently, who runs I Singing Bowls in LA. It's phenomenal singing bowl instruments, and he was talking about a client of his who is or was the health minister of Norway, who is a trained, obviously, MD, but also a homeopath and I think Reiki practitioner or something like that, but brings in singing bowls. And so depending on what the patient needs at his office in Norway, as the health minister, might choose a more Eastern holistic approach or go Western on it. And it just depends on the client and what is needed. And I think having both is super cool, because while I think there's a long road of what we can train for and study and work with and research in sound healing, it's also super approachable. And so it doesn't take much as far as continuing education credits as a physician to employ a couple of these techniques. And so when I see there's a physician in Argentina, who works at a children's hospital, and I see his Instagram is wonderful, and it's all like little kids with singing bowls, and you're like, this is so great. So get them hooked young, I think, in that way.
Yeah. Wow. That is fascinating. Now I envision, what have you worked with people in recovery? I envision clinics where recovery clinics, maybe where they're integrating these techniques. Would that be wonderful? Have you heard of anybody doing that?
I'm sure it's happening. I haven't spoken to anyone directly who's doing that. I love that there's so many outlets for this, and it can be overwhelming as a practitioner because everyone's like, "Well, have you tried yoga? Have you tried nursing homes? Have you tried libraries?" You're like, literally, there's no place where this doesn't work.
Yeah.
I met a death doula recently that specializes in her bowls, and her bowls are really interesting.
Mm.
These by our Western standards, very wonky, but from an Eastern energetic standpoint, incredibly powerful antique Himalayan bowls that she was doing this death doula work with. And you're like, that is super cool. And I could totally see how for recovery, it would be a potent tool because it's all about carving out neural pathways and working with neuroplasticity. So if you are entrained into a certain pattern of behavior, this will absolutely help smooth out those pathways and reinstill the intention that you're working with.
Right. So if somebody's looking for a sound healer, there's so many people out there. Well, maybe it's not a saturated market, but there are a lot of choices. What should somebody be looking for? Should they be particular about, who they choose? Or if there's a yoga studio and they want somebody to come in and play the bowl, should they be particular about who comes and does that?
I would like to say yes, but I don't know. We don't have a governing body. So, and this is a discussion I've had for many years with many prominent pillars of our industry about how can we get a collective body of knowledge as a foundation. Like if you I see, I don't even particularly work with chakra centers, but if you couldn't tell me what a chakra center is, I have to call your sound healing into question a little bit, or tell me what is the lineage that you're working with, because acutonics goes through the meridians, but that's cool. That's a more comprehensive system to me. What makes me nervous because there's so many sham healers. Someone, I don't need to call anyone out in particular, but they have a practice where for I think $175 a session, you can lay underneath their piano while they play, and that's their sound therapy. And you're like, okay, but is there a technique? What's the plan? You're just going to play Chopin at me and then charge me 170? But like, I don't find that plausible, but maybe. So I think it's an important question, but I don't have a good answer for you because so the Atmabhuti School is one of the only programs in the world that is an accredited program of higher education. But Baccalaureate's program is incredibly knowledgeable and comprehensive, but it's not like does she certify? I don't know if she's certified or how
She
that
does.
works.
Well, she does. And actually, she also works with the International Association of Sound Therapy.
Yeah, and that's the other point. So there's two levels, right?
They're doing a lot of research, to try to, I think, give credibility to the industry.
There's certainly folks that have more awareness and knowledge of what they're trying to achieve and more informed technique and practice that they're working with than others. There's a crutch in this industry of intuition, where it's important to be intuitive, I think, certainly, because we don't need to be the Western dogmatic classical approach to music. There's no right or wrong. There is some wrong, but there is a level of intuition, but the intuition is not enough for me. One of my pet peeves is when I hear this statement from people, it just feels really ignorant. They say, well, I don't play the gong plays me. It's like, okay, but that's like saying, I don't know. It's like if you were speaking tongues instead of speaking in English, like, well, someone else is speaking through you, but let's say you had Tourette's or something. Like you have a say in this. Like you can also be part of this conversation. That kind of thing makes me really nervous. And so I like the balance between, like, yes, I think finding someone who's certified is important, but I also can't vouch for some of these certifications. Some of them are really flimsy 12-hour things, and you cannot learn this industry in 12 hours. You just can't.
Right. Yeah, that was something I encountered as well. I was in Becca's course, and I think it's amazing. And the reason I signed up for it was because of her background. Her background to me gave her more credibility as a sound
Totally.
and I felt like I needed to have some structure, some process. But I did definitely encounter people that when I was always asking a lot of questions, because I felt like I needed, well, I've studied music all my life, and there's a certain way to do things. It's not that I
Mhm.
just sit down with my clarinet and do, play. I mean, there's a certain way to tongue, a certain way to do the fingering, a certain way for every little passage, and is there intuition involved? Of course, that's how you make music. But I would get responses like, "Oh, just play, just feel it," Oh boy, and and I would feel like, well, gosh, would almost feel ashamed that I was asking the question, but I know there's a balance, and it's and what she does is present a very, very balanced course. She's an energy uh, worker as well as a fantastic musician, so
Yeah.
um,
And the
so
credit for her course is I can pick her students out by their sound and their touch when I'm like scrolling through Instagram. I'm like, I bet
really,
that's one of the Sonic Mastery students. And most of the time I'm right.
yeah,
Because with that little bit of training, you're at the top percentage of this industry because that little bit of knowledge is just was lacking.
right, right, yeah. Well, I mean, what do you see in the future for yourself? Maybe what you're doing, projects, and also how you're trying to help move this industry forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been a busy couple of years. So I'm in a place right now where I'm wrapping up two bigger projects. One of them has been gone ongoing for way too long, but it happens. There's so much to be done. So I feel pretty accomplished when I can check off some small items. I went to do my session. I didn't like the mallets. Great. We created and launched all the new mallets. It's like, okay. And so right now I'm finishing up my second book. It's actually a primer geared for sound practitioners and sound bath facilitators who are not musicians. So what I've found is a big obstacle for folks is they're drawn into these instruments by the nature of the simplicity of the instrument, but then sort of max out pretty quickly of like, well, now what do I do? And so try to
Mhm.
provide some frameworks for how to stitch things together. Um, yeah, Elemental Gong, my online gong course just launched. That was the big project over the last few months, and there's a smaller singing bowl version that I'm finishing as well. So that's keeping me busy on top of auditioning and freelancing. And I do feel a little bit hypocritical sometimes because I'm not doing as many public events or private sessions, but I've also done so much of it that I'm like, I'm okay. I'm cranking out some creative, supportive materials, resources right now, and then I'll find that balance again too. So
Right,
and there's no shortage of recording in between.
right, and you're focusing on something that really, I think, is so necessary and uh, will benefit so many of us. So
Mm.
it's wonderful, Thank you for that. And how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty good about my website. So I keep it fairly up to date. So it's zenwithben.me. I don't feel like a .com, but that has caused some confusion for folks. So, but zenwithben.me, and Instagram is my main piece. I'm part of that millennial segment of society that still really values Instagram for what it could be and not the what it's become. But
Right.
and that's also Zen with Ben. So those are my primary two. I mean, I have like a Facebook presence, but I'm not really on it if I'm being honest, and maybe I
Yeah,
should be, but whatever.
yeah. It's hard
um,
to follow them.
all of them. Well, and it's such a different. I don't know. The energy is so different. Truthfully, my demographic is more Facebook driven, but I don't feel Facebook driven, so I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to do what feels good to me.
Right. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I can't wait to go back and listen to this myself. I know we've just covered so many things, and I hope that in the future we can have you back on again for part
I
two.
would love that.
All right. So good luck with everything you're doing, and thank you, listeners, for sticking it out with us. And if you have any questions, please comment below, and we can get back to you.